Physical evidence of the Orang Pendek is scant, but it's there. And when you put it all together, it paints a strange picture. Over the past century, various researchers have come across footprints, fur, incomprehensible artifacts, and even blurry photos and videos. The problem is that every time it seemed that evidence was about to confirm the existence of this creature, something went wrong. Samples turned out to be incomplete. DNA tests did not give clear answers, and cameras only recorded vague shadows. Back in 1924, British researcher Frederick Douglass found a series of strange tracks near one of the tribal settlements. The tracks did not belong to a tiger, a bear, or any known primate. They were similar to human ones, but much wider and had more developed fingers, which could indicate an adaptation for climbing trees. The strangest thing was that the tracks led deep into the forest, but then suddenly disappeared, as if the creature had stopped walking or had climbed up. This is repeated in many cases. The tracks of Orang Pendek seem to disappear into thin air. In 2001, a group of researchers from the UK and Indonesia came across similar prints in the depths of the Kerinci Seblat National Park. They made plaster casts and sent them for analysis. The biologists' conclusions were unusual. The tracks really did not belong to any known animal living in these forests. They had anatomical features that distinguished them from both primates and humans, but it is impossible to prove that they belonged to Orang Pendek. Samples of fur have also been found more than once. One of the most famous cases occurred in 2009, when independent cryptozoologist Richard Freeman obtained samples of fur that were said to belong to an Orang Pendek. He sent them to a lab for DNA analysis. The results were puzzling. The fur did not match any known mammal species, but it also did not provide enough evidence to say that it was something completely new. Scientists have suggested that it could be an unknown mutation of the primate, but have not been able to definitively explain it. Another important point is video footage. In 2011, an Indonesian team of researchers set up dozens of camera traps in the region where Orang Pendek has been most frequently reported. After a few weeks, the cameras captured strange silhouettes among the trees. They were short, moving quickly, but none of the images were clear enough to say for sure that it was a bipedal creature that was different from any known animal. Every time it seems that evidence is about to confirm the existence of this creature, it turns out to be insufficiently convincing. If you sum it all up, you get a very strange situation. Orang Pendek is seen, his tracks are found, his fur is analyzed, but there is no real evidence to put an end to this case. There are two theories that explain this. The first is the extraordinary caution and adaptability of the creature. If Orang Pendek does exist, it may have a unique ability to camouflage, keen instincts that allow it to avoid humans, and perhaps even an understanding that it should not be found. The second is that we lack the tools or knowledge to understand what it is we are looking for. Perhaps this creature is so different from everything we know that we simply cannot classify it. But if it does not belong to any of the known species, then what is it? The testimonies and findings collected over the decades leave no doubt that the Orang Pendek phenomenon is much more complex than it might seem at first glance. These are not just stories about an unknown animal that was allegedly seen in the jungles of Sumatra. There is a much deeper layer here. Part of the culture, beliefs, and even fears of local tribes who pass on knowledge about this creature from generation to generation, putting into it something more than just a description of its appearance. Researchers who have worked in Sumatra for years have repeatedly noted an interesting detail. All attempts to track down Orang Pendek ended the same way. Regardless of the availability of modern equipment, camera traps, or even armed groups, it was not possible to find it. At best, there were blurred silhouettes in photos or videos, or a series of tracks that suddenly ended in the middle of the forest, as if the creature had disappeared into thin air. And here, the attention of researchers gradually shifted from physical evidence to the behavioral features of this creature. An ordinary animal does not avoid a person with such obsessive consistency and precision. It does not ignore traps, does not change routes as soon as it sees strangers. But Orang Pendek is just such a creature. And this is what prompted many to think that we are dealing not just with a biological species, but with something more intelligent. Something that has the ability to sense observation and avoid it. This idea is confirmed by the stories of local residents. For them, Orang Pendek is not an animal, and not even just a forest spirit. It is a living creature, endowed with special power, which can both appear to a person and remain invisible. Local shamans, elders of tribes living on the outskirts of the Kerinci Seblat National Park, a place considered the epicenter of all encounters with this creature, know especially much about this. Shamans openly say that Orang Pendek is not an ordinary animal. They believe that this creature is an old soul of the forest, a wise guardian of the jungle, able to communicate with nature and influence people. According to them, he knows when he's being hunted, sees traps, and can even change the direction of the hunter, leading him deeper into the forest or making him get lost. Often, those who dared to hunt Orang Pendek returned with strange feelings. They complained of loss of strength, an inexplicable feeling of anxiety and fear, as if someone was walking next to him all the time and watching. Locals say that this is the forest, letting them know that they should not be disturbed. And Orang Pendek is not just a part of the forest, but its face, its protector. Shamans also tell more mystical things. According to them, Orang Pendek has the ability to disappear, not physically, but in the way spirits can do. He supposedly knows how to fade in a person's eyes, becoming invisible even when he is standing very close. They assure that this is why camera traps do not work. This creature sees them before the camera has time to work, and he dodges, takes other routes, disappears before anyone has time to take a picture. In some villages, there is a belief that Orang Pendek is able to penetrate dreams. His image appears to those who are looking for him too persistently or want to harm him. In such dreams, the creature comes not as an enemy, but as a warning. They say, "Do not go where you should not." And after such visions, people usually stop their search. Researchers, who have delved into these stories admit that all these stories are very similar to each other, even if they come from different parts of the island. They are surprising in the consistency of details and how seriously the locals take this topic. For many tribes, talking about Orang Pendek is almost taboo. They are afraid to offend him or bring trouble. But could it be that behind all these legends and fears lies something real? Something that has not yet come into the field of view of science, only because it wants to. What if this creature really has intelligence, the ability to predict human actions, and almost instinctively hide from civilization? Can modern science afford to ignore so much of the same evidence simply because there is no material evidence? The more you immerse yourself in the history of local shamans, the more you understand. For these people, Orang Pendek is not fiction. It is part of their world, their reality. Perhaps for us it seems like something on the verge of fiction and mysticism. But for those who live in this jungle, he is always there. He sees everyone who steps into his territory. And only because he wants to, we know about him at all. Despite decades of searching, numerous expeditions, and hundreds of testimonies, the creature, which the locals call Orang Pendek, remains one of the greatest mysteries of the Sumatran jungle. Scientists admit that the region where it was seen is still one of the least explored on the planet. Dense forests, difficult terrain, and the almost complete absence of roads make these territories an ideal refuge for any species that wants to remain unnoticed. Attempts by major scientific organizations to organize large-scale search expeditions have always ended in failure. The reasons are various: insufficient funding, lack of government support, and sometimes simply the banal indifference of science to what it cannot explain. Is modern science really interested in finding a creature that will question its own theories? And there is something to question. After all, if Orang Pendek is real, if this two-legged, hairy hominid really still lives in Sumatra, it turns the idea not only about the fauna of the planet, but also about human evolution. In this case, we will have to admit that the human race is far from the only one on this planet, and perhaps not even the most developed in some aspects of survival. Researchers have repeatedly drawn attention to an interesting detail. All the evidence about Orang Pendek describes him as a creature that moves on two legs, has a strong physique, but at the same time is very small in height. His arms are disproportionately long. His fingers are strong. All this is more reminiscent of the description of ancient hominids that should have died out long ago. But if one of these species has survived to this day, hiding from humans, this would explain many blank spots in evolution. Let us recall how, by chance, in 2003, the remains of the so-called hobbit were found on the island of Flores, the Floresian man, or Homo floresiensis. Their height did not exceed 1 meter, but they had a developed brain and were able to make primitive tools. And this find proved that small hominids could survive in isolated territories much longer than we thought. Why couldn't something like this happen in Sumatra? It is quite possible that Orang Pendek is the same missing link that science has been searching for decades. Not just a myth or a local invention, but a real relic species that could have become a branch of evolution that developed in parallel with humans. And the question here is no longer whether we will be able to catch this creature. The main thing is whether we are ready to recognize the consequences of its existence. If Orang Pendek exists, then the entire history of human development needs to be revised. All these beautiful theories about a single branch of evolution of Homo sapiens, which destroyed all competitors and became the pinnacle of development, may turn out to be a simplification. And what if some of these competitors did not disappear? What if they survived? They simply knew how to hide better than others. Perhaps that is why large scientific institutions avoid this topic. After all, the appearance of confirmation of the existence of Orang Pendek can destroy not only part of evolutionary theories, but also undermine confidence in the entire system of knowledge. The world will suddenly realize that we do not know everything about our own origin. That even today, 21st century, there may be intelligent beings on Earth who prefer to remain in the shadows. Imagine how our attitude towards ourselves will change if we understand that humans are not the only intelligent beings walking on two legs on this planet. That there have always been those who knew about our existence, but never tried to make contact. Is it because they already know the true price of human civilization? This story makes you think, maybe we're not alone in this world. Maybe part of the truth about our origin is hidden. And Orang Pendek is not just another jungle myth, but the key to a secret that they never wanted to reveal. Because behind it is a completely different picture of the world, where man is not the crown of evolution, but just one of the many species that once shared this planet.